Welcome to Formed, where each week we navigate a relevant topic or question through honest conversations. We are three pastors with three different backgrounds on staff together at Irving Bible Church in Irving, Texas. We believe we are constantly being formed in the way of Jesus for the sake of the world, and we hope this podcast helps with that. So let's jump into this week's episode of Formed. Welcome back to another week of Formed. We're back.
We're back.
Yes, we are.
Took a couple weeks off, Thanksgiving break. What was the best thing you ate over Thanksgiving?
Oh, man.
Well, I didn't have a traditional Thanksgiving. I usually, this is the first year I've gone on vacation for Thanksgiving.
I was in Scottsdale.
So I was in Scottsdale, and I didn't have a traditional Thanksgiving meal. I went to a steakhouse, and I had the best bone-in ribeye that I've had in a while. So that was my best
Bone-in ribeye.
That's the way to go.
I can't exactly top that, but I did our family Thanksgiving meal. I always enjoyed doing that, cooking for everybody, and we just did very simple but traditional stuff. And so, I mean, you can't go wrong with. We had both pecan pie and pumpkin pie, so there you go.
Got your pies covered.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what he led with.
Yeah, well, that's what I would lead with, yeah.
I smoked my first turkey.
Nice.
And it turned out really well.
What a flex.
That's
Look
great.
at you. Yeah.
No, we were, I was nervous about it, but it actually turned out, well,
Way to go.
Pretty
I
good.
enjoyed it.
Pictures look good.
Well, thank you. So obviously we took a couple weeks off. Yesterday here at IBC was a big decorating day because we record this on Tuesdays, and so Monday was a huge decorating day for our church. We come together as a staff and decorate for Christmas in the Advent season, which starts this coming Sunday as this pod comes out on Thursday. So what better of a podcast topic to talk about Advent?
Let's talk Advent.
And the Advent season, because for me, I didn't grow up with the Advent where the furthest thing I knew about Advent was it was the cool calendars at Walmart that had themes like superheroes and stuff.
Get a Lego minifigure.
Yeah. It was basically just a cool way to count down to Christmas. It's cool, you can open up this door and get, a toy or something. But there's so much more than just a fun calendar at Walmart. And I've come to respect this season so much over the years. And so let's just talk about it. Of what is Advent? Maybe Sissy, you could start on what's the word Advent? What is it?
Yeah, so Advent kicks off the start of the liturgical calendar. And it begins the fourth Sunday before Christmas. So it's the 4 weeks preceding Christmas. And it comes from the Latin word, Advent comes from the Latin word adventus, which means coming. And so it's this time, this season in our calendar, in the Christian calendar, where we prepare for and wait for in anticipation and expectation for the coming of Christ. So that's
this
kind of
idea of arrival. And one of the things that's interesting about Advent, of course, is it's actually intended to help us to both look back and look ahead, right? That we look back to the first arrival of Christ in his incarnation, and we look ahead to the second advent of Christ, the second arrival or coming of Christ when he returns. And so, interestingly enough, the first week of Advent is traditionally sort of pointing ahead to that second coming, and it's reminding us that we live in between the two arrivals of Christ. We are a people who live suspended between looking back and looking ahead, between his first coming and his second coming. And what does it mean for us to live in this season in between? That's one of the reasons why the consummate Advent hymn is O Come, Emmanuel. We're identifying with Israel who's waiting, who's longing for the arrival of Messiah. O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel that mourns in lonely exile here until the Son of God appear. Right? We're identifying with that of we're longing for that day of his arrival where freedom is finally fully realized. And so it's living suspended between the two arrivals.
And what I love about that is, in this season, where it brings together the past, the present, and the future as we wait for Christ, right? Because we hear, at least for many of us that are in the church or have grown up in the church, we've heard the story of Christmas hundreds of times. And yet every year we get to, it's not just retelling, but almost immersing ourselves in the story, entering into the story and experiencing the confusion and the frustration, the longing that Israel experienced as they waited for the Messiah year after year. Right? And so it's this reflection of the past, remembering how Israel longed for the Messiah, but then in the present, it's the coming of Christ into our present circumstances. So recognizing that there is brokenness and pain and suffering in our lives, and longing for, paying attention to the ways Christ enters into those places and meets us in the places where we need hope and encouragement and help. And then it's also, so that's the past, the present, it's also the future. It's anticipating that the world is broken. This is not how things are meant to be, and we look forward to, with great anticipation, to this day when Christ will return. He will set all things right. And so I love that in Advent, it's this reflection of the coming of Christ, but it's bringing together the past, present, and the future. And it's just a beautiful season to reflect on that.
You mentioned the liturgical calendar a little bit ago. If there's somebody listening, they're like, I don't really know about the liturgical calendar. Could one of you explain that?
Yeah, so that's, I think, an important setup even to talk about sort of the history of Advent is first to step back and just to think about, well, what is the whole idea of the liturgical calendar? The word liturgy just comes from a Greek word that means the work of the people. And so it's a word that's used to refer to what we do when we gather for worship is our liturgy, the work of the people in worship. And the liturgical calendar is a way of ordering the calendar, ordering the year around the story of Jesus. So if you think back in the Old Testament, God appointed for the people of Israel these annual festivals or feasts that were meant to be a communal embodied rhythm of remembrance of the mighty deeds of God, right? The saving work of God. And so this was one way that the people of Israel, the Old Covenant community, was shaped by the story of the saving deeds of God. Well, the early church says we want sort of our version of that. What does it mean for those of us who have experienced salvation through Jesus to have our lives ordered by the story of the saving deeds of God in Christ? And so a little less connected to Israel's history and more connected to the story of Jesus. How do we have our lives shaped by the life story of Jesus? And so appointing periods throughout the year that remember key moments in the life story of Jesus. Interestingly enough, in terms of the historical development of this kind of idea of liturgical calendar and even how we get to Advent, one of the days that actually becomes a pretty big deal in the early centuries of the church is January 6th, which is not particularly a big deal for those of us in evangelical churches, but this is the feast day of the Epiphany. And so particularly in Eastern Orthodoxy, that was a day that was set aside to remember Christ's baptism, but then it also got kind of associated with Christ's birth. Well, in Western Christianity, centered in Rome, they developed the tradition in the early centuries of celebrating Christ's birth on December 25th, the Feast of the Nativity. And, of course, there's all kind of controversy about, is it the 25th of December because that was a Roman pagan holiday, and people get all concerned up in arms about that. And this is just a day that the church selected. Whether it's connected to something prior to that, it's not something that I think we need to worry too much about. We're not worshiping those pagan gods. We're remembering the birth of Jesus on the Feast of the Nativity. But that then is where you get this idea of the 12 days of Christmas from December 25th to January 6th. That is the season of Christmas time. And so what the church did then, when they kind of had established this tradition of celebrating the birth of Christ on the 25th of December, is just recognize that there's an opportunity for us to have a season of preparation for this special feast day. And oftentimes in the church, the idea was, let's have a period of fasting that precedes this period of feasting, this time of celebration. It's a way for us to spiritually prepare ourselves. And of course, given the way that we eat around the holidays, it might not be a bad idea if we reconnected to the idea of fasting a little bit in preparation. But it was just a season of spiritual preparation. So that's why these 4 Sundays leading up to the celebration of the Nativity, the celebration of Christ's birth, is the season of spiritual preparation, so as to every year immerse ourselves in the life story of Jesus, beginning a new year, a new liturgical year, with this preparation for the celebration of his birth. And
then as each year, what's really beautiful about the liturgical calendar, because similar to you, I didn't grow up in a tradition where we follow the liturgical calendar until I came to IBC. And as each year passes by, we go deeper and deeper into the story of Christ's life, death, resurrection, ascension, and then the sending of the Spirit. And so we allow this story to shape our lives. And it's just a beautiful way to not only mark time, but to allow it to mark our lives.
That was one of my questions. Was why is it, for some of us or people listening that didn't grow up recognizing that word or a season, why is it important to recognize that?
Yeah, I think part of it is the idea of this day, the day that we celebrate Jesus' arrival, his birth, is made even more special, more meaningful for us if we actually prepare ourselves for it. Similar to Lent and Easter, and sometimes Advent is actually sort of looked at as like a mini Lent, right? It's very much the same idea of a period of preparation. And I, like y'all, didn't grow up in a liturgical church that celebrated or marked the calendar, but Easter became so much more powerful and impactful for me when we had this period of preparation to get ready for it, rather than it sort of comes and goes. In the same way with Christmas. Now, Christmas for us as evangelical Christians is, I think, typically been a big deal because it's also a big deal culturally. But this is one of the reasons I think Advent is so important, is because we can, I think, easily get swept up into sort of cultural preparation for Christmas and miss spiritual preparation for Christmas. And so Advent invites us into, let's not get so swept up in the consumeristic kind of cultural Christmas thing that's about Santa and reindeers and presents and just all of that and the busyness that comes with that. And hear me, I'm not completely bagging on that. It's just the recognition that we can get wrapped up in that and miss actually some of the spiritual significance of what this time is supposed to be about. So Advent calls us to remember. It calls us to slow down and remember what it is that we're really to focus on, to think about as we prepare ourselves for the birth of Christ.
And I think it's really significant that we start the liturgical calendar, the Christian year, with Advent. It doesn't begin with a season of busyness or frenzy or productivity or relying on our resources or strategies and plans. It begins with waiting. And I think waiting in hope and faith is such a key part of our discipleship to Jesus, learning to wait in hope and faith. And when we talk about waiting in hope, because we use that word pretty loosely in our culture, it's not just optimism, it's not wishful thinking. Our hope is based on this sure conviction that we have, that Christ has come, Christ will come again, and Christ has conquered sin and death. And so because of that, we wait with joyful anticipation, with expectation. And so we look back on what Christ has done in the past. We pay attention to what he's doing in our lives and the way he's meeting us in these places where we need his help. And then we look forward with anticipation to the day when he will return, when he will set all things right, when he will fix all that's broken. And so we can live today as people of faith and people of hope. And I think that's what really makes Advent so significant and necessary. It makes the celebration of Christmas even richer because of this time of preparation and examination and reflecting. And so for me, it's reflecting on my life to say, where do I need Christ to meet me today? Where are those places of where I need hope and encouragement, where I need his help? Where am I putting my hope? Because I can quite subtly put my hope in other things and people. So am I placing false hope somewhere else? And then it's an opportunity to, again, center my life on this ultimate hope that we have in Christ.
That's good.
That's good. What are some of the traditions for the church during Advent?
Yeah, so oftentimes one of the central traditions in the church and can be extended into the home. We used to really try to make a big deal out of lighting the Advent wreath when we would share a meal together as a family, but certainly that's something that we do each of the weeks of Advent when we gather together as a church for worship, is we light a candle that is just...
So do you just light a wreath on fire?
So there are 4 candles in a circle in this wreath, and then the center candle is the Christ candle, which is lit on Christmas Eve, that represents the light of the world that's come into the world. And so you wind up, though, with these 4 candles that all burn sort of at different levels, because the one you light the first week, it's going to burn all the way down over the course of those 4 weeks, but then you light another candle each subsequent week as just a way of kind of marking time and preparing, getting ready for lighting that candle then that's at the center that we light on Christmas Eve. And I got to tell you, again, the connection between Christmas and Easter, Advent and Lent, we light the Christ candle on Christmas Eve. And then one of the things that I do as part of my role in the Good Friday service, when we remember the death of Jesus, it's always one of the most powerful moments for me of what we do gathered for worship is to extinguish the Christ candle on Good Friday, because we lit that candle on Christmas Eve, remembering his birth, his arrival in the world, and we extinguished the candle on Good Friday, remembering his death. And so that's one of the real significant traditions around Advent is the lighting of the Advent wreath.
You had some other ones, though.
So one of the other ones that's a common practice is what's called the Jesse tree.
Yep.
And the Jesse tree, it connects back to that place in the Psalms that's a prophecy of Christ coming, the idea of a branch that will emerge from the stump of Jesse. And so Jesse, the father of David, so Jesus comes from the line, the genealogy of David. And so one of the traditions is actually to have a series of readings. Sometimes it's actually literally using a tree that'll have ornaments that represent each of these stories that sort of tells the backstory of Jesus. It gives a little bit of Jesus' genealogy in preparation for his arrival. And so, again, situating the birth of Christ in the larger story of what God has been up to in the centuries leading up to this moment, his time of preparing for this particular moment in history, this particular moment in salvation history, but that has had a rich backstory. And so the Jesse tree is a tradition that's used to kind of tell that backstory, especially meaningful for families to do with kids, to give them the sense of that history. Sometimes a family activity that can be done is a paper chain. So you create a little link in a paper chain for each day of preparation. It's a little similar to that idea of the calendar where you open the door and you find the chocolate inside. Well, this would just be a paper chain, and we would write a verse of Scripture that's part of that sort of backstory of Jesus, prophecies of his coming. And so it's an opportunity. Each day you take a link off the chain, so the chain gets shorter and shorter as you're getting closer and closer to Christmas. And so it's just a way of marking the time and getting that greater sense of anticipation as the chain comes apart and gets closer and closer.
And well, I was just going to add, there's nothing necessarily special about the candles or the tree or the paper chain, but again, these are embodied experiences that allow us to prepare our hearts. And I think that's really, it's necessary for us. It's part of the way we remember and we reflect is through bodily action. Yeah, so that's what's really great about it.
Yeah. Those 4 weeks leading up to Christmas and Christ's birth, what's those? There's 4 words, and what's the 4 words, and what is the significance of those?
They're kind of themes for each of the weeks of Advent, and this is one of those things that emerges a little bit more recently, and as is often the case when you talk about Christian tradition, first we recognize this is a tradition. It's not necessarily something that the Bible commands of us, and yet there is that biblical precedent of this is the way that God set up for the Old Covenant people of Israel to be formed by these communal embodied rhythms of remembrance. And so there's something biblical in that sense, that there's a kind of a history of this sort of thing, but this tradition that emerges over time. And with all traditions, it's hard to say this is precisely when it started, because it's one of those things that sort of begins and then kind of spreads over time. But a more recent tradition is using these 4 themes: hope, peace, joy, and love. And again, even as you think about Christmas decorations that you see when you are going around in the month of December, oftentimes those words are very prominent in our Christmas decor: hope, peace, joy, love, precisely because the incarnation of Jesus is the incarnation of hope. It is the incarnation of peace. It is the incarnation of joy. It is the incarnation of love. And so taking one of those themes each week to sort of focus in the preparation for Christ's arrival. Again, the first week, hope, oftentimes is that week that points ahead, looking to his second coming, his second arrival.
Yeah, one of the great things that we do here, or one of the meaningful things to me that we do here is we light the candle, and then there's always a passage related to one of those themes. Typically, that's how we've done it. And what I love about it is that I don't have specific personal traditions that I practice over Advent, but that we get to do that as a community together. I think that's really significant and meaningful. And again, it's helping us prepare and reflect on the coming of Christ, what he's done, what he will do, what he's doing today.
Yeah, that's what I kind of wanted to wrap up the conversation there. Is there any personal or family traditions during Advent? Or if not, is there a favorite part of the Advent season for you?
Yeah, I think oftentimes this is one of those things that's more about the church gathered together for worship. There are ways in which we can extend that into our homes by having an Advent wreath that just as we like the Advent wreath at church, so too we like the Advent wreath at our table. And some of these kinds of practices that we can do in our home that extends into our families what we do gathered as a church. And I think especially when I think about your kids, Isaac, being really little, like this is a great opportunity to engage some of those practices as a family that's just helping your kids as they're young learn more and more about the story and kind of why we do what we do in this time of the year. I think one of the really great things about the season is its music. And you can sort of quibble about the Advent songs versus Christmas songs. Like technically speaking, those Christmas songs are for that season of December 25th to January 6th. Joy to the world, the Lord is come, that he's arrived. Well, that's technically more of a Christmas song than an Advent song. And yet what happens is we wind up singing so many Christmas songs sort of in the lead up that in that season from the 25th to the 6th, like we're sort of done with those, pack them away until next year. And so, but certainly the music of the season is some of the best, richest Christian hymns are some of our Christmas hymns, our Christmas songs. And so I love when we begin singing those together as a church.
I think, and you said this earlier, that Advent is often thought of to be a mini Lent, which we don't really think of Lent with Christmas, right? Yeah. But it really is supposed to be the season of reflection, repentance, renewal. It's another opportunity to think, to reflect on our lives. And part of that is often fasting, and with that comes prayer and giving, which is where, kind of this idea of giving gifts at Christmas time comes from. And so I think it's an opportunity, again, to reflect on, as I come to this time of year, it's reflection on my own life and what God is doing, and where God is meeting me in these places of need. But it's also an opportunity to think about, are there opportunities for me to give even more? Are there opportunities for me to be generous with what the Lord has given me? I think that's part of the Advent season that we often miss because we live in such a consumeristic culture where we jump from, you're selling Christmas trees at Costco in August. And so I love that we have these 4 weeks where we actually slow down a little bit and we take time to reflect and to prepare our hearts for in anticipation of celebrating the birth of Christ, but also celebrating his return, because that's a big part of Advent. It's the reflection on his first coming, but it's also this anticipation of his second coming. So, I don't have necessarily personal traditions that I follow. Again, it's much more communal to me. The one thing I do try to do every year, and this is more of a practice than a tradition, is I typically find some Advent devotional that really helps me focus more on what is God doing in me in this season, and how can I reflect on and prepare my heart for that in greater ways.
I'll take a cop out a little bit and say the Christmas Eve service. Just that, I know it might not technically fall into this, but just growing up, this was one of the few things we made a point going to, and here, there's just something so powerful about being in that room, celebrating Christ's birth, the candles, and the church we was at in Kentucky, Barb's home church, my wife, and they would do it, at midnight or 11 to 12.
Yeah.
PJs, families coming in PJs and stuff, but it was just there's just something so powerful about it, and singing those beautiful songs and. Barry was setting up a great transition because at the end of each episode, we have some banter fun. And this past week, Barry was talking about how much of a fan of Mariah Carey he was. And it was like, all right, well, we have to talk about...
when he thinks about Christmas.
Yes. Christmas songs. You're slandering me.
Let's just turn over to Barry, Mariah Carey at Christmas.
Oh. If we're going to cancel anything, can we please cancel... Mariah Carey, All I Want for Christmas. It's just,
I'd agree
if I
with that.
never heard it again, that would really, satisfy my heart.
I'm trying not to talk because I want to make sure we have a clear clip for social media on that one, so we can clip that.
Cancel Mariah's. Yeah.
Okay, let's do, what's our favorite, let's do favorite first, and then we'll do cancel second. What's some of our favorite Christmas songs?
I thought of two, so... Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas.
Oh, I have that
Frank
one.
Sinatra.
Yeah.
And then the Christmas song, is that called Chestnuts Roasting? Right.
Nat King Cole.
Wait, sing a little more so I know if we're talking about the same thing.
Can you?
Well, I have to get my voice ready for that. Yeah.
Go ahead, Sissy.
I wrote down 3 songs, and that was 2 of them.
Well, I don't have a third one. Have a third one. Those are my 2.
Such good songs.
Yeah, I mean, so mine's a hymn, but I just love the hymn, O Holy Night.
That's a good one.
That is such a powerful song. Is
that yours?
Is that your list?
Those are my 3 songs.
Just covering the whole list.
Yes. That was great.
It's awesome.
No, it's beautiful. There's this producer, Tommy Prophet. He actually spoke at a conference I went to in Nashville a few weeks ago, and he puts on this huge Christmas thing in Nashville the past few years. And last year, there is this beautiful rendition of "O Holy Night," Torrin Wells, and this other singer. And anyway, I've been watching the past few days. We watched it over and over, so it's been really good. Such a beautiful song.
Yeah.
Cancel songs. What songs would we want to cancel?
There are a few that just you play every year over and over, and I got to tell you, I'm not one of those that likes to put the radio on all Christmas all the time. No. My wife, she could start listening to Christmas music at the end of August. It would be happy for her if they did all Christmas all the time, starting about August 31st. But no, thank you. And in part because of these songs that play over and over again. We made a reference to Mariah Carey already.
She's only relevant at Christmas.
Now you might get a little bit of hate mail for that one, but
I mean,
I'm not going to debate with you, but there might be some that would debate with you.
If we just never heard another one of her songs again, I think I'd be cool with it. But.
She does have some fan base, we have to recognize. I'm not sure they're
not in the room, and they may not be listening.
I don't know if they're listening to the pod.
I think my one song I'd cancel, not one. So I agree with Mariah. That'd probably be my number one. My number 2 is Last Christmas.
Yes,
Wham.
Wham. Next on the list for me as well.
That's just terrible.
Yeah, it's really
and it's just really constantly on too.
Always on.
Yeah.
When you're rolling all Christmas all the time, you don't.
That's true.
Choose from. And then I mean, I love Sir Paul McCartney.
Yes,
but that is it. Wings or is it Paul McCartney? I don't know. But what's the Paul McCartney one that?
I can't just remember a beat down.
You don't know what I'm talking about?
I can't remember what Christmas song this is.
You said it to me yesterday, and I was like, "Yeah, that's it."
This is what I'm going to go listen to after this. All right, I have 2 unique songs that I'm just
you want to cancel.
Yes, and I'm just out on both of them, but y'all might not be. The Chipmunk song. There's just something about their voices. I just don't. I don't care. I'm like, no, it's just not fun.
Well, Isaac, it's not real chipmunks. It's sped up to sound that way. So,
but
your
it's
kids
kind of a
probably
gag.
like it.
It's fun. It's playful.
Barry likes it, so he likes the Chipmunk song. And here's another one: Grandma got ran over by a reindeer.
That's just a sad song. Yeah,
I'm just I don't know. It was. I guess it was cool when I was 9. But
it was cool then. As kids, I feel like we liked it. Yeah.
Santa Baby, I'm out. just all out.
Yeah.
And of course, Baby It's Cold Outside should never be played.
Right.
I think that
wrong.
has been canceled
Yeah.
at this point.
It has been
Yeah.
canceled. I will say, one of the, in regards to Christmas songs, one of the coolest things that we did last year, so it was Barb's dream for the longest time to see New York City at Christmas. Mm-hmm. That was her her Christmas or her birthday gift last year for turning 30. We went up to New York City, 48 hours, and y'all are going to laugh at us, but here's all the Christmas stuff. We're downtown, and we split the AirPods, and we had one each, and we had like a Christmas music playlist, and just walked around downtown with like this like soundtrack playing. And I'm like, all right, we had fun, but I know it was probably like, that sounds so cheesy. And
No, it sounds magical. Magical.
It's like, oh, this is
It's
fun.
a very touristy New York City at Christmas thing to do. But
Sissy would hate on
it.
us so much if she was.
No, I think it's great. Only because Barb did it.
Simply having a wonderful Christmas time. That's it. The
That's
winning song that
yeah.
we're canceling.
Oh.
Yeah, that's.
You want to sing a few bars for us?
I can't-
Sissy?
So we need to tell them why I have a great voice. Nobody really knows this about me.
So sit
true.
next to
Not
her
true.
at service.
Sit next to me in church, you'll find out.
10:45.
I sing best when Crystal's singing with me. So.
All right, we'll be back next week for another week of Form.